Ripe Fruit is a nonprofit education initiative dedicated to identifying and strengthening innate skills as they appear along the spectrum of ways we think and learn. Our mission is to infuse mainstream learning with enhanced curriculum, customized lesson plans, and demonstrated creative systems. We aim to foster comprehensive learning, enthusiasm, and confidence for all students. The DEI+N Talks serves as a conduit, think tank, and intensive to discuss how to identify and support unique learning styles. All systems are go. The DEI+N Talks starts now.
What a great intro. Welcome to the NeuroHacks edition of the DEI+N Talks. As the learner develops, they are creating a customized experience that includes workarounds that might seem foreign to even siblings that grew up in the same house as them. This month, we're exploring tips, tricks, and habits that we've built in our systems to not only survive, but thrive. We have a special treat in the guests on the panel and some hacks that you may not even realize is a hack. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of hosts or sponsors or Ripe Fruit Foundation. This information is not intended to replace therapeutic or medical advice. This session is being recorded. We're going to start off with a collage of life hacks. If you're in the audience and you hear something that reminds you of your own life hack or resonates, please let us know in the chat.
Because I will forget everything that I need to have. When I wake up in the morning, in order to remember it, I grab my Apple Watch, my Fitbit, and my AirPods, and I put them on top of my outfit or undergarments that I'm going to wear for the day so that I can remember to bring them.
One of my life hacks, my favorite life hacks, is just staying in touch with my body throughout the day. It's a great self-awareness hack. Acknowledging when I might need to take a break, when I might need some water, when I need to get up and stretch. Just staying online, staying in touch with my body, and knowing what my body is trying to tell me throughout the day and what I need, and letting that actually affect my actions when I need to eat, when I need to have a little bit of social time. So that's my life hack.
A quick hack is just music. Listening to feel-good music instantly put me in a positive mood.
Things are working out in my favor. You know, I say that when I encounter perceived setbacks or failures or things didn't go my way, or I'm just in a moody, emotionally dark place. You know, just reciting those words, things are working out in my favor, really helps. It helps shift this perception around the situation, and it also keeps me in a positive mind frame to remind myself that I can
One of the
overcome
things I had to
anything.
learn was to tie everything that I do to a purpose, whether it's something really small or really large. Once you tie it with the purpose, you can constantly remind yourself of why you're doing what you're doing. Once you remind yourself, then it helps you to stay focused on that task. So it can be something as small as like, hey, I have to go to the market because I want to cook a creme brulee, you know? So just tie it to a purpose and just remind yourself of that purpose, and it helps you to stay focused on the task.
My life hack is a process that I use personally and professionally to work through an issue. It involves gathering information that I have and then using that to create a map to move forward. Examples of issues could be managing ADHD in the workplace or challenges with setting boundaries. This process aligns with the Ghanaian Adinkra symbol of Sankofa. If you're not familiar with it, it's represented by the bird that looks back with its feet pointing forward. And it's holding the egg that has the wisdom that you use from the past to guide your way forward. So in this strategy, I sometimes use clustering, which is represented in the puzzle piece image, and that helps me gather information. And then I use that information to sort of map out how I'm going to work through things, and that's represented in the bridge drawing that's inside the egg.
So this is something that I consider a life hack. I have a reminder set in my phone at a certain time every day that reminds me, it says, God is good. So it comes on, it pops up at about 10 o'clock every morning. So, of course, we never know how we're going to be feeling when we wake up, but when I see it, I make it my business to read it aloud so that I can pre-plan to have a good day and be reminded that some people didn't wake up.
Starting this.
Okay, so those are some examples of life hacks. And to continue this conversation, we have three panelists for today's session, and they will be introducing themselves. We're going to start out with our first, and these are not in any particular order, but we're going to start with our first panelist, which is Cheyanne Zadia. Tell us about yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cheyanne Zadia. I go by Zadia. That's my artist name, stage name. I'm a curator, a dot connector, tastemaker, artist, filmmaker, poet, designer, musician. I'm just an overall creative person. Yeah, I'm just an artist. But I'm also a producer of events, and I spent 3 years teaching performing arts for students on the spectrum of autism. So I've had a lot of time with students who are neurodiverse.
Okay, and our next panelist is Nomita Advani. She is a staple here on the Dean Talks. Nomita, tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Nomita. I'm a licensed art therapist, the last 7 years working in a clinical practice with children and adolescents and adults. And prior to that, for 15 years, I was an art educator, and for 10 years, a visual arts department chair at a school for neurodiverse students with different learning abilities.
Okay, thank you very much. And now I'm introducing our third panelist, which is Paulo Gregory. Paulo, let us know what you have going on.
Well, it's great to be here and be with these amazing colleagues too. So I am a social designer. I've been working in transformative work around DEI, strategic visioning for systemic change for many years. And I do that work now utilizing a tool that I developed about a dozen years ago called Cohado, which is it's a tool that helps us experience an embodied experience of what it is like to work together in a collaborative way to really see each other as one united self. So we'll get into that a little bit more later.
Okay, thank you. And once again, welcome, Paulo. Glad to have you on board the Dean Talks. Let's begin by defining a life hack. So how would each of you define a life hack according to your own understanding? Cheyanne, why don't you lead us off?
Well, for me, a life hack is just like an adaptation to life. So like something that you might do or tell yourself, or a way of operating in a particular situation, just to be able to serve as your highest self in that moment, or just in general.
Okay. And next up, for your definition or your understanding of life hack is Paulo.
Well, having grown up a kid with dyslexia and ADD, I didn't have the H. Thank goodness. I don't think my mom would have made it. But I grew up with those as a Black kid and growing up in a white community. So my whole life has been a hack, I would say, trying to figure out how to navigate systems that didn't understand who I was or how I functioned or how I saw the world. And so the life hack to me is how do
how do you move around through beyond toxic systemic structures in order to thrive?
Outstanding answer. Nomita?
I see a life hack as creating a way of doing things to simplify them and or clarify them.
All right. So before we continue, I'm going to give my couple of examples of a life hack from my perspective. And I am your host. My name is Stephen King. And no, not that Stephen King. I mean, I am the Stephen King, but I'm not that Stephen King. So I am the Dean Talks Stephen King, not the horror novelist Stephen King, in case there was any confusion. So, and just, I'm going to be brief here. Let's look at your brain and how your brain is set up. So we have, and just for the purposes of our conversation and in the interest of time, we're going to refer to two brains that we have. One is going to be a basic brain and one will be an advanced brain. So the basic brain's job literally is to keep you alive. What do I mean by that? You folks don't know how your body regulates temperature, how your body regulates how your liver functions, or how your spleen functions, or how your stomach begins the process of digestion and moving that through until it goes into your small intestine, large intestine, so on and so forth. That is your basic brain's job, is to keep you alive on a fundamental level. The advanced brain is where we are now, for example. That's where we are contemplating the intricacies of the universe and pondering the Dean Talks and what we're going to say next and how we're going to communicate it. Those are advanced brain functions. Now, if we go back into history, the basic brain was, in order to keep you alive, would have you, contemplate the negativity of the world. In other words, I'm going to walk out of this cave where A, I can find something to eat, or B, I may get eaten alive by that wild animal. So just because the situations have changed and nuanced does not negate the function of the basic brain to talk you out of everything that you try to do. So when you think about that, you may wake up one day and say, I want to do a podcast. And then your basic brain immediately says, well, there's a million podcasts out there. You don't sound good, you don't look good, and that's the process that I'm talking about. So we should all be familiar with that process of our own brain trying to talk us out of anything that is new, anything that may theoretically put us in danger. Your basic brain, in a basic brain form, is like, a podcast may kill us, which of course we all know is not true, but that's just an adaptation of that basic brain function as we are here in the 21st century. So my hack, let's get to the point. My hack is when that basic brain of mine begins to talk me out of anything, I immediately count backwards. I go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And what that does is that interrupts the, say again? That interrupts that process of negativity of the basic brain saying, don't put me in danger, don't take me out there at all, I'm fine just laying here in bed. My heart is beating, my spleen is functioning, my temperature is good. Why do you want to go out and start a worldwide podcast? So as soon as that happens, as soon as that basic brain begins to talk my advanced brain out of what it wants to do, I just go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is different than going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because the counting down short circuits that kind of that initiative for the basic brain to talk you out of what your potential successes may be. That's one. The other one is my grandmother. My grandmother was an educator, and her last, all throughout her life, what she said to me was, I do not want to have anything that's going to impact my memory at the end of life, whether that be dementia, Alzheimer's, or what. That was her greatest fear. She lived until she was 94. And at the end of life, my grandmother recognized her own mental decline. And what she started doing was she started writing things down that were important to her on the wall in her bedroom. It wasn't done in a calendar, because remember, we're talking about somebody who wasn't using digital things. They were using paper, pen. She didn't write anything down on a calendar, which may be forgotten. She began to write things down, like make my oatmeal. She began to write things down on her wall, like call Steven, so that she would have a more permanent place for that to help her memory as long as possible. So that's another life hack. And that then begins to segue us into our next question, which is talks about kind of home life and how that applies to our conversation. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and talk about, what are some of the hacks in home life that make life more manageable. And we'll start with our panelist member, Nomita.
Thank you, Stephen. I wanted to talk about a few hacks for staying organized and a couple of hacks about, relating and relationships within the home. So since I work at home, I try to be really mindful of keeping boundaries in terms of space. So I really try to keep my workspace separate from my personal space in my home, because my home is really small and I'm a therapist, and that's a lot of energy to take in a work area. So I try to keep that contained and make sure that I sort of separate those two. And I even go as far as making sure none of my paperwork or anything that's related to work is slowly, moving into any of my personal space, because I really think the energy matters. And since I don't go to a workspace and leave home, that's a hack that I use to kind of keep my work and personal spaces separate. The other thing I also do is when I'm leaving my home, the keys, the mask, the phone, the purse, I try to keep them all close to the door, organized, on a hook or something. So that's something I just don't even have to think about. And then when I return, they go right back. So that's kind of done and I don't have to think about them. So I'm not spending time searching for stuff when I'm leaving my home. Also, I'm a list maker. So particularly for a shopping list, I'll put it on my phone, and actually I get really thrilled. And the thing I do is, as I'm putting things in my basket, I'm deleting them from my list. And that visual just thrills me. I don't know. It's just a feeling accomplished or realizing that something's getting done. And also, if I don't find things, then it stays on the list and I don't have to try to remember them later to put them back on the list when I'm going back out to get something. So those are just some small organizational tips, given my personal way of thinking, my anxiety, my living situation, my work situation. And then thinking about relationships in the home, it's really, I've always felt that it's really, really important to keep a balance between your individual growth and your relational growth as a person. Both have to be really a part of you and mindful, and you want to try to find the balance as best as you can. So if you're living in a family setting, or you're living with roommates, or you're living with a partner, that's something really important to keep in mind, that you're balancing your individual growth and time along with the relational time. A lot harder if you're a parent, more challenging. You may have to postpone that sometimes, but it's really important to be mindful that you're always balancing those two parts of yourself and growing those two parts of yourself, because they interrelate and they matter to each other, and they, one will grow because of the other. Also, communication in relationship is huge. What I've figured out, probably as a therapist and just, being someone who is sort of hypervigilant, I am really mindful of paying attention to nonverbal communication. And I am aware that with neurodiversity, there are some people for whom nonverbal communication is hard to pick up on, but you can also focus on looking at your own nonverbal communication, or have people help you notice it for you and help you sort of recognize it, because I think that's really where truth lies and true communication lies, because we are able to filter our verbal conversations and say what we want to say, but what's really going on is very often in the body language and the nonverbal communication. So just being aware of that when you're constantly living with people, that makes a big difference. And also being mindful, if you do live alone, in terms of that balancing your individual and relational self, if you live alone, you want to be mindful of making sure you're taking time to reach out and connect with people to be able to balance that. Because someone told me that they did the research and said that 50% of homes in Maryland are single homes. So we do want to make sure we're keeping both of those things in mind when you're thinking about balancing those two parts of yourself. So those were my hacks for this topic.
Okay, and we are listening to the Dean Talks. This is the Life Hacks edition. We're talking about life hacks in the home, and next up on that subject matter is Cheyanne.
Zadia, you got to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so for me, some home life hacks are keeping my tabs open until the thing is complete. Like whatever it is that I'm working on, like I'll have a computer full of tabs until I'm able to close out each one. And that's like whether it's ordering something, right now I'm doing casting, whether it's completing casting calls or whatever work I need to do. I just keep the tab open on my computer until that task is done. Also, similar to what you were saying, Nomita, just like carving out my own space. So I live with my partner and my dog, and I'm also very much a loner at times. So I have to make sure that I make space for myself. So that could be just, going in another room and just like carving out that space for myself. Using my notes, like you said, computer notes or writing it down. It's no need to really like strain your memory, like with like a to-do list when you have pen and paper and you can write the thing down. Like we can use our memory for experiences and things that we, want to remember, like good times and stuff like that. Like if we have pen and paper, like use the pen and paper to make the to-do list or take notes. And that's like pretty much what I have for my at-home life hacks.
Okay, we are going to, well, first I'm going to address a question that came up about a certificate. It's interesting that the audience brought up a certificate. That is something that we are actually working on offline as part of our Dean Talk strategy. So it's just interesting that that actually came up after a conversation I was having with Ebony just yesterday about that. So to answer your question is no, you will not get a certificate for attending today's session. However, check in with us often at ripefruit.org because coming soon to a theater near you will be certificates about the Dean Talks. All right. Now, you may not think of community work as a hack, but if you're accounting for the agendas of competing interest groups or political parties or investors, perhaps, then you might want to consider it takes a hack to circumvent the natural order of things. What are some community hacks that come to mind? And leading us off there is Paulo.
Thank you, Stephen. So I guess I'd like to start this by kind of offering a view. And the view is really what I would call the difference between the masculine and feminine paradigm. And that doesn't mean men or women, it's just the paradigms that we have in the Western culture attributed to those perspectives. And, sort of dipping back, one of the things that I've, as a neurodiverse individual and a individual that was often in spaces where I was the only in a lot of different dimensions, what that does is it gives you a capacity to kind of pull back. If you stop judging yourself, then it gives you the ability to kind of pull your lens back and see broader patterns. And one of the things that I strongly believe dyslexia is it's not a disability. It's an ability to read patterns rather than to see things in a linear progression. What I mean by that is I walked into a room this week. I was facilitating a retreat for an organization that was having some challenges within a department. And, we spent about 5 minutes together. And with the group, I said, okay, so these two folks should be your party organizers because they are excited. They have lots of energy. They have things going on. And these two folks that are sitting over here together need to be your observers because they have not said anything, but they've been so tuned in for the last 5 minutes. You can ask them exactly what went down and they'll be able to tell it, right? So in a sense, I'm reading that room. And the reason I can do that is because in order to be safe, I had to be able to read things that other people were doing that were not necessarily spoken. And so I call that reading operating systems. And if we take that up to where Stephen, talked about it at a very political level, you see one policy side is really looking at self as the ultimate goal. Like it's all about how do I get what I want and how do I get what I need? And I would call that the masculine paradigm. And they're also exercising a lot of, it's not value-based in terms of otherness, it's value-based in terms of taking care of self. Now, if we look at the other side, there's a value basis that is saying we really need to look at all the people and see how we are doing collectively. And we need to hold ourselves accountable as a collective, not just as an individual. And so that's really what all my work is based on, is things boil down to these paradigms. So as we're moving around the world, I know that I have a very powerful value system that really is based on that we are all connected and we are responsible for each other's well-being. So the hack is starting to notice where you see those two paradigms operating. Is this a self-oriented environment or is this a collective environment? And, we all are different, so go where you need to, but I think we all need to start moving towards that collective. The second thing I'll say is one of my favorite quotes is by Buckminster Fuller. And he said, you never change things by fighting against the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. And I do think that this old divide and conquer model is obsolete, that we can no longer, it's not sustainable. Having few people win and many, many people lose is not a sustainable thing socially, economically, environmentally, etc. So how do we begin to cultivate ways of doing things that are different from this other model and really demonstrate a new model in a very small way? And if folks haven't heard of it, I think about things a lot in fractals. And a fractal is a small example of a larger system. To give you an example, if you can look at an oak tree, and that's a huge system, lots of branches, leaves, acorns, all these things. But if you pick up one leaf of an oak tree, you see that oak tree modeled in that leaf. You see the pattern of the oak tree in that smaller space. So if we can work in ways where we start creating what I would call fractals of new ways of being, then we can hack the whole system. And I'll bring that down in the third example to the work I do. It's one of the projects we're working on now is the Black Butterfly Network, which is a network of Black businesses in Baltimore that activate the two wings of East and West Baltimore, where most of the social oppression has happened. And so we're bringing these communities of entrepreneurs together to begin to share resources, share information, work on collective projects, do pop-ups together, et cetera, which is really a new model, because in the past, entrepreneurship has always been looked at as a competitive process. You know, you do pitch competitions and you do a competitive analysis when you're starting a business, but we do collaborative analysis. Where can we work together to change the system so that we can create our own economy in the Black community and not be fighting against this economy that wants to deny us? So those are three examples of kind of how we work in community around this thought.
Okay, our conversation is community hacks, community work as a hack. And to continue in this line of thought, we're going to shift to Zadia.
Yes. So just to piggyback off what you were saying, I think that for me, my biggest hack for community has been to cultivate my own space. Instead of, like reaching out to these larger corporations or companies to to jump on an event or to curate events for them, I just started curating events myself. So I've been a curator for about 10 years now. And I started off with just a small community of artists, just literally my friends who were creative, who I saw that they just needed an outlet and a platform to share their work. And that just snowballed into, something greater than I even realized. And it just came from like cultivating space, starting with the people around me. And then filling in the gaps of things that were missing in Baltimore. So, for example, you have MICA, which is an awesome institute for artists, but you have a bunch of creatives and artists in Baltimore who don't have the funding to go to MICA. So what I did was I would find a space, literally find a space. Sometimes that space was my house. And I would just curate an event for those artists who are just as talented to display their work or their talent, whatever that be. And I think that that's the biggest hack that, I think us as like people of color need to be like more aware of, just like creating our own things, and not being so inclined to reach out to, like you said, Paulo, these, like this system that, aren't really even truly interested in us beyond what we can contribute to them economically, as far as like us buying into whatever they have going on. So that's been my biggest life hack as a community organizer, cultivating space for the people that need it the most.
Okay. Well, let's see. Let's touch on that. So where we are, and the purpose of the Dean Talks is to embrace diversity and to open up lanes of thought travel that are all encompassing, realizing that we are coming from a space where we, and when I say we, I'm talking, people of color have been marginalized. At some point, the conversation must shift to allow diversity to exist across the board, and we learn from each other in order to solve some of these, really just these humongous problems that we face on a societal level. I'm heading down a rabbit hole, so before I do that, I'm going to back up out of that rabbit hole and continue with the with the topics. So let's turn the discussion to the classroom or learning environments. Is homeschooling a life hack? Are certifications life hacks over traditional four-year programs? Let's stay with those kind of as thought starters and stay focused on the classroom environment. And we're gonna let Zadia lead that as well.
Okay. So is homeschooling a life hack? I would say yes and no, depending on the student. So I work with students on a spectrum of autism. My students are brilliant academically, and academics comes super easy for them. So um, the main thing that we had to focus on with them is the social aspect, how they interact with peers, how they interact with the world around them. So me personally, I don't believe that for that type of student, I don't believe that homeschooling, well, I guess I'm sorry, I'm thinking of homeschooling in the sense of virtual learning. So homeschooling can be it can be a life hack, but I think that social part, we have to incorporate that somehow, and that requires the student to be outside of the home and with other students. um uh yeah, they just need to interact with peers. I think that when it comes to schooling, for me, one of my biggest life hacks is to know my student before they enter the classroom. um That means reading the portfolio, reading the IEP, which is the individualized education program set up for them, and also setting the expectation for the student in advance. So whether they're in homeschool or, in public schooling, just letting that student know in advance what's expected, that can take away a lot of unnecessary stress on both parties, for the teacher and the student, when we know like what we're coming in this classroom to do, or what's expected out of this assignment. And also allowing room for breaks. That's a big hack in my classroom. We took like breaks almost every 5 to 10 minutes because it was necessary. Like, even think about in my personal life, like I know I need breaks. Like if I'm doing something that, it might be something that I might not even necessarily want to do, which in some of the cases with certain students, that will be the case. It might be an activity they might not be interested. We have to take that break within that 5 to 10 minutes, and it just relieves a lot of stress for me and the student. And also allowing the student to take the lead and take charge. So I had one student who was like very bullheaded. Like it didn't matter like what the activity was, they were going with the opposite. So it could be like, all right, everybody in the class, we're going to Disney World. This is a school trip. Let's go. And that student would just be like, no, I don't want to go to Disney World. I hate Disney World. And that was just like the default of that. Just not the default, but like that would be like just like their natural instinct to almost everything that we would present to them. So instead of constantly presenting things, I would offer an option or two, like 2 or 3 options to that particular student, and allow them to take lead of the classroom for that day. And I would see that just a big difference in how they interacted with the classroom and with their peers when they felt like they were in charge. And that's just like how I think we all can relate to that. Like we want to feel like we're in charge of our life. We want to feel like, we have options. And I think a lot of our students get frustrated when they feel like they're constantly being told what to do all the time. So yeah, those are some life hacks, or
Okay.
well, classroom hacks.
Yeah, classroom hacks. And what I would say is it's about, and this goes back to what I said really about diversity and being a part of a greater conversation. When someone feels that they are a part of the trajectory, it helps them buy into the trajectory. So very well said, Cheyanne. Let's let's move this question right on over to Nomita. We're talking about hacks in the classroom or learning environment.
Thank you. Yeah, Zadia, I agree in terms of a case-by-case basis with homeschooling. During the pandemic, when I was working with my clients, children and adolescents, they were actually experiencing that difference where all of a sudden their environment changed, they were at home, and it is different virtual versus traditional homeschooling that existed before. It was more isolating, but it was actually, there were some students who really, really preferred it. Those who were sensorily easily stimulated, they loved not being in the chaotic sort of classroom environment where, there are other students and all of the chatter and all of this overstimulation. So they actually thrived and did better at home and didn't want to go back into the in-person setting. So it really, I think, is about figuring out what does each student need and really making that available in our education system to sort of be able to give those students all of those different options. And in terms of addressing completion awards or degrees or something, I think we see in real life, there are plenty of very successful people who did not have a degree, a traditional education degree. So I really don't think you can measure success in the real world based off of just that. And then, my experience in the classroom, I had a lot of kids, where there was sensory overload, where there was executive functioning struggles and challenges. So I really focused on how I set up the room to try to make sure that those things were addressed as best as possible. So not having too much overstimulation in what all was around the room, just having the main cues that they would need to understand what they needed or what they needed to do, have some visual cues for that, but not too much more going on. And also, I had a little drawer system all labeled and marked for materials. And that really helped for kids who needed that organizational help, where they could start to become more independent. They knew they just had to walk up to that and find it, and they didn't have to keep coming to me or anyone else. And it sort of built their ability to sort of follow all the steps and do things more independently. And, lastly, emotional safety was huge in my room. So I had a poster, one of those no bullying zone kind of thing. And when I did it, I didn't even think too much about it, but I just wanted to sort of address that. And it really became something very, very important, where the kids, as soon as they felt, emotionally unsafe or even the littlest bit of teasing or anything, they didn't need to come to me. They would point to that poster and say, we're in a no bully zone. And somehow it seemed to work. I mean, they were younger kids, so, I don't know how it would have translated to adolescents, but that's kind of where you start the process when they're younger and they start to sort of absorb and imbibe those habits. And that was something that actually really helped. And I kind of was able to stay out of a lot of the little stuff that was going on because they had something to point to. And so the classroom setup was my hack, is like, how am I going to set it up to already alleviate and address and try to manage and see what I can do for all these different kids and their different needs that are coming in that are neurodiverse.
Okay. Once again, we are listening to the Life Hacks edition of the Dean Talks. Visit ripefruit.org for more information about our initiatives. And the purpose of this show really was to do what we're doing, which is present and hold life hacks, classroom hacks, situational hacks that have been proven through the panelists, either personally or through their own experience. And I think that we're really hitting the mark here with this show. Paulo, we're talking about classroom hacks.
Yeah, and I'm going to flip the script a little bit, because I think, we've been focused a lot on kids, how to support the young people that are neurodiverse. And, the flip I'd like to do, which is a hack in and of itself, is, my belief that neurodiversity is actually not a disability, but it's just a different way of processing and moving through the world that has its own hacks embedded in it. And so as we look at, let's say a classroom, we've set up virtually all of our standard classrooms in a very hierarchical, very competitive way. We make kids, we individually score kids, and then we grade them on a level, and we say, okay, those in the top tier, get A's, and the ones at the bottom tier fail. And that creates this huge competitive space, which to me is an anti-learning space. Cohado, the game that I designed and that system that I designed actually did begin as a game. And the game was that we're not playing against each other like you do in dominoes, where there's one winner and many losers. We're playing with each other as co-opponents, not opponents. So we're working collaboratively to lift the score as high as we can for the community, which is represented by the circle of players, and creating assets for that, and eliminating waste by leaving no pieces hanging, and also leaving none of our co-opponents hanging throughout the entire game. And so the score is a shared score at the end of the game. So a classroom hack, even in a traditional classroom, might be, still evaluate the strengths of each of the young people in the area of study that they're in, but then have a collective score where you take the 30 kids in the class and you average their grades, and you say, this is our class score. And if, Sophia is getting like a 95 with herself, and Cheyanne is getting like a 25, Sophia is going to look at Cheyanne and say, you're holding down the score. Let me teach you what I know about this so that we can raise the whole score for the class. And then you have 30 teachers instead of one. And Cheyanne's going to be, she's going to be killer on the basketball court and help Sophia out on her handle. So how do we then start creating environments of learning, not environments of competition? So that's a classroom hack from a different perspective.
Okay, and let's take that into just overall life hacks. And we're going to let you continue, Paulo, outside of the classroom into the world.
Okay, awesome. And I will take that same perspective of kind of flipping the script. I'll give you a quick example. I knew a lawyer who was a woman, and she was coming up to be a partner in this law firm. And she had won every case she had had. She was doing a ton of community work way out there, supporting folks with volunteer pro bono, lawyering, etc. And she came up for partner, which means she then becomes one of the owners of the firm. And she was denied becoming a partner. And so she said, look, I've won every case. I've got this, like all the criteria I've killed. So why am I not being allowed to be a partner? And they said, well, it's because you don't have any confidence. And she said, well, with a record like that, how can I not have confidence? And they said, well, when you get a case, you walk around to everybody and ask them how they would handle that case, which shows you don't have any confidence, which is this like weird masculine viewpoint, right? Because to me, that means you are intelligent because you're gathering all the intelligence that you have around that. And so you're expanding your capacity, and therefore you're stronger than if you were to just go do it in your office by yourself. And I think that what happens in a culture like ours is that there's this dominant culture which thinks its way is the only way. And then there are all of us who are different because we're women, or we're different because we're gay or queer, or we're different because we're small, or we're different in all of these spaces. And those differences are pushed down and not acknowledged and not even seen. So if we really want to hack life, we need to lift all of that difference up into the space and celebrate it, and lift those folks up for the amazing skills they have, like, like kids with or adults with autism can sense things long before most other folks can. So how do we begin to utilize these assets that we have here in the community and lift them up so that we can hack this whole system so everybody is acknowledged?
Outstanding. Nomita?
Yeah, so, in terms of outside in the world or just, outside of the topics that we covered, I think spiritual rituals are really, really important to kind of stay grounded and be centered. And I do those every day to sort of start my day and set intentions and things like that. Sort of seeing ourselves as a whole system, because there's nothing about us that's separate. Our minds, our emotions, our physical self, our spiritual selves, it's all one system. So we have to be kind of attending to all of those parts of ourselves, as well as, when we connect with others. So the sort of the making sure you're doing something physical, something that allows you to movement. And one of the biggest things that I've more recently included and learned is to really, really bring humor into my life more, because the world has just been getting more and more serious and I can't stand it. It's like, it just gets too heavy, and there's so much to be joyful about as well. And we're just losing, I find myself losing a lot of that, with all of this cloak of heaviness, with everything that goes on and everything that has been going on. And humor is contagious. So it can really help not just yourself, but, everyone around you. And it's also just like tears are an outlet, laughter is an outlet, really, really necessary. So I think humor, if you can insert it every day, just no matter how weird that humor is, everyone has their own sense of humor. But I think that's really, really important. And, just as a therapist and as a teacher, recognizing this difference in again, how people reach out for emotional support. I think that we are really lacking in that in a lot of ways. And building an emotional support system is really, really huge. And I think, I just, it's being someone who lives on my own and also is someone who's an introvert, that's something also I had to really cultivate. Even though I may have had a system, I didn't always use it. So, it's something I think that is really, really important, that has to go beyond just a partner or a spouse or, one or two people. And just particularly what I've noticed is, men who really, really need more of an emotional support, and they don't have that in the same way that women tend to. Not to generalize, I'm sure there are exceptions, and there's also the gender spectrum that I don't want to leave out. But in general, when you think of that binary, it's really lacking. A man can name you his network support in 5 minutes, and he will not be able to name you an emotional support system. Like, he can tell you all his network of work and business and all of that, but he will be hard pressed to name you an emotional support system. So that's also something, just as a therapist, that I notice, and and as a teacher, sort of that difference as well. And just in myself, being someone who tends to sort of lean in only to myself, and like Paulo said, you gotta sort of spread that, and sort of make sure you're taking from others as well, and creating that whole support system as human beings to each other.
We are talking about life hacks. This is the life hacks edition of the Dean Talks. Cheyanne, we're talking about kind of global hacks now. What are a few examples from you?
Okay, I'm gonna keep it short because I'm taking all the mental notes from Paulo and Nomita, and I think it's on point. I would say that the biggest thing is just like, in general, awareness of self, and just being aware of, one, who you are, and what works for you, and being honest in what works for you. And that requires, like Nomita says, tapping into your emotions, and also understanding your patterns. I'm a firm believer that we, just like the seasons change, we all have those seasonal patterns. So if you, a lot of people don't pay attention, but For me, I started to notice that at a particular time during a year, or probably since I've been aware of myself, maybe for the last 10 years, I've noticed that certain times during a year, I would feel certain things as it relates to certain people or certain environments, like very specifically during that time of year. And it wasn't until I started journaling and realizing that these exact emotions are happening on these, like, during this exact time of year. And I think that once we start to pay attention to our seasonal patterns and just become more aware of ourselves as we relate to like the world outside of us, I think that, we'll be way better off. Like, that's the biggest life hack, just being aware of yourself and your patterns.
Okay. Thank you very much. This has been an information-packed session, and time, of course, has escaped us. We try to keep this around an hour, but there was just been a lot going on here, so we're editing in real time here, kind of behind the scenes. But where we are now is what are the panelists kind of working on? So, Nomita, if you could start and just tell us what you are working on right now. What are some of your kind of current projects, and then we'll move on to Paulo and Zadia.
So I'm actually just trying to compile some of the ways I work into something more comprehensive that maybe other people can benefit from. So I'm trying to piece some of that together. It's very much in the works. But my contact is my email, and if anyone has any questions or thoughts, I'm always happy to hear from them.
Okay, and now we're going to go to Paulo. Paulo, what are you working on right now? And be sure to include a website or contact information.
Yeah, beautiful. The thing I mentioned of the Black Butterfly Exchange is the creating this network of Black businesses to support each other and collaboratively work. And I'm going to take my time just to give you an image that that we created that really tells the story. It's a 40-second animation, if I can share screen.
Thank you very much, Paulo. And the Black Butterfly Exchange, I'm looking forward to some more information about that, because I like the graphic and I like how you explain that. So your website is paulogregory.com, Paulogregory.com. And from there, folks can continue to get some more information about your initiatives. Zadia, I am going to toss this over to you. And if you could tell us how we can communicate with you and what are some of the things that you are working on right now.
Yes, so I am currently working on casting a TV series called Vacants, which is a spin-off of my latest project, Vacants. I released a project 2 years ago, and I recently received funding from Johns Hopkins to turn it into a TV series. So I'm super excited about that. You can find my email in the chat. But we're also casting right now. If you're interested in more information on that, you can follow me on Instagram at Bougigi, or you can follow Vacants Series Official. We just started that Instagram page for the series to get more information on that. And I'm just gonna leave you all with like a brief, not really a poem, but a saying. I actually just performed this for the Vegan Soul Fest that just happened last Saturday. And I'm just going to leave you with the words. And it goes, somebody's got to do it, what it takes. We can't just let the people run in place. Somebody's got to feed the people, give them grace. If God be the source, I'll be the connecting force. If love opens doors, I'll be an open door. Gotta keep in mind what you're chosen for. If we all sow a seed, we can grow some more. And that's just like a little poem I wanted to leave y'all with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. You have contributed so much to this process. We are going to jump over to our very own Ebony Kinney. Ebony, let's go over our big hits and takeaways for this Dean Talks.
Okay. Oh, I'm muted. All right. Thank you, Zooms. Let me know I'm muted. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This was such a great eye-opening session. I hope that you all feel that way as well. The chat was quiet, so I hope that means all of the wheels were turning. I want to acknowledge that we're about 5 minutes over. Don't worry, we're winding down. Thanks to the speakers. Thank you, Zadia. Thanks for what you shared and for the wonderful work that you're doing. Thank you, Paulo. Thank you. I've been able to experience Cohado, the game. I know that's phenomenal work. Thank you, Nomita, for the heart and your approach and how you do your work and your therapy. I'm looking forward to seeing how I can get more and be evolved from it. So, and then I had 2 life hacks that I didn't get to work in, but I wanted to make sure that I shared. One for me is eye contact. So one way that I'm neurodiverse is that I'm extremely literal. And they would always say, make eye contact, make exact eye contact. And I would do it to an intensified level, but I didn't really realize the purpose. And it occurred to me at some point, the purpose is that when you're looking and making eye contact with people, you can determine when you've bruised them or hurt their feelings or done something they don't understand. That's really your connecting your communication with folks. So that has been an insightful way for me to adjust and navigate this world. And also in terms of meditation, the other life hack is in terms of meditation. If you are meditating and trying to still the mind and having trouble doing so, you can imagine a drop of water. Just imagine that moment when the drop of water forms and drops. Eventually you will get to the level that you can still your mind so much that that drop of water would be distracting. But at first you can just focus on that one drop of water. Some people focus on the breath. That's just a variation of that. I invite you to check out ripefruit.org and all the wonderful work that we're doing in this space. Continue to join the Dean Talks. We have a game that's in the works and we've begun to develop, which allows people to develop their ability to determine when various stimuli are being introduced and strengthen that ability, when, how much stimuli. So we invite you to stay in contact with that. And I thank you for joining. I'm going to turn it back over to Steve because I think he has a few closing remarks and you'll see a poll pop up on your screen in a second. Please participate.
The only closing remarks I have is join us for next month's Dean Talks, the September edition, which is the creative entrepreneur. Visit ripefruit.org. That's ripefruit.org for more information. Thank you for joining us here on the Dean Talks. Take a moment and fill out that survey that is posted. And once again, this format was a little different. We really left a lot of space for our panelists to present hacks in various ways. So this show will be preserved and you will be able to go to ripefruit.org and not only tap this show, but also tap other Dean Talks. And we are really moving forward with our initiative. As a matter of fact, you can actually look for Ebony Kinney, who is now writing for Onyx Magazine, which is a historical magazine based out of Florida, and she is also pushing some of her content and this content through Onyx Magazine, which if you want to sample that, just go to onyxmagazine.com. Thank you again for joining us for the Dean Talks. My name is Stephen King, your host, and on behalf of the Ripe Fruit Foundation and ripefruitcreative.com, as well as the Creative Kid podcast, I want to thank you and look forward to seeing you next time on the Dean Talks. Remember, register if you can, but at the end of the day, you will be able to find a direct link to join, but we always like to gather some information when possible through the registration process. All of that can be found at ripefruit.org. Once again, thanking Ebony Kinney. I was just kind of talking a little bit here to give that poll a chance to kind of soak a little bit. But now we're going to wrap this up. Thank you very much for joining us for this edition of the Dean Talks. Visit ripefruit.org for more information. My name is Stephen King, and on behalf of Ripe Fruit, thank you very much. And look for those certificates coming soon. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you both. This is amazing.
Bye. Thank you.